You're listening to Arenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arenal Pass.
Well, in Paris, in Lille, on Tuesday, we're all there. We've now coordinated. Everybody will be in Paris in Lille on Tuesday, looking for drafts. Post it on Twitter. Hit us up. Anyway, Hayden. Speaking of limited, heading into episode 68 of Arenal Pass, we are joined by Michael Feng today to do a deep dive on the limited format. We actually recorded that conversation before recording the intro, and it's really good. You know, he's a wealth of knowledge, really looks at the game from a quantitative perspective and breaks things down in a manner that makes a lot of sense. Like, I think that he's one of the best minds for kind of explaining some of these key concepts like pack distribution breakdown, how many heroes are supported, et cetera, et cetera. So that's helped me a lot with developing my heuristics. But anyway, Hayden, how was your week in Flesh and Blood?
My week in Flesh and Blood was good. I played a final road to nationals, a draft road to nationals. Was that this past weekend? It must have been. Yeah, it was. Okay. Yeah, I just realized that was Utrecht the same weekend as the final weekend of Road to Nationals. That's funny. It's cool. Played. What did I do? I had a 7-man pod at the start, which was kind of odd. It's weird because we're recording so late this week, so I feel like I'm so out of kilter with like where we are in the week. We usually record on like a Tuesday, or Wednesday. It's now Friday for me. So I had like a Road to Nationals. It was great. Drafted Fire, my first pod, in a 7-man pod. It was kind of odd. I hadn't drafted a 7-man pod before, so it was good experience. And then like Icelander in my second pod, and then lost again in the quarterfinal of another draft Road to Nationals with the Droma deck. So I drafted all 3 heroes across the day though, which was fun. Enjoyed it. It was good to get that last kind of Road to Nationals in and see a few more people qualify for Nationals, which I guess now the cutoff has happened and we're hurtling towards it post PT Lille. What about yourself?
Yep, so I played no events, just doubled down on testing. Our testing has increased double. So we have a little bit of a macro schedule in terms of like how much we test and how often we test, and it's like slowly ramps up as we progress through the months. So a lot more testing. I can't make US Nationals. I think, we said that on the pod already, so not really incentivized to go to the Road to Nationals. And although it's great draft practice, I do find at this point I'm lucky enough to have a local group that does a bit of a draft camp, on the weekends. So that's kind of time better spent for me. So that's where I'll be. But yeah, mostly testing. Anyway, Hayden, what about the news? What's new this week?
What about it?
What about
the news? Well, look, I mean, we saw Utrecht happen over the weekend. The first mixed format calling took place in the Netherlands, and a big congratulations to our latest calling winner, Sander Neft. Taking down Fire Mirror, I believe, in the finals. Fire was kind of the talked about deck heading into the weekend. I guess it's going to be the talked about deck heading into Singapore, Lille. So it'd be interesting to see where we go next. I guess I wanted to ask you, Brendan, any thoughts overall on the event? Because this episode we are talking limited with Michael, but from a constructor standpoint, I guess in a mixed format standpoint, any kind of thoughts you had over the weekend? I'm not sure if you, it was unfortunate there was no coverage, so it was kind of hard to follow. But we do know that it was. Fire Mirror in the finals, Fire wins the event. A few Fires top 8. Most played deck at the event. I think about 20% of the format was Fire, or players playing Fire.
So I know a lot of people have talked about this format being like a very good hero pie. I think that's going to be drastically different the next high level event. This event is really sort of the first indication of where the format's going and kind of the dominant decks. We will see people respond to that, but I think this idea of like a very diverse pie will kind of go away as people realize that, their hero or their pet hero is maybe not competitive against the so-called best deck, and that so-called best deck is very, very good at doing its one thing. So you need to have a plan for that. If your deck can't beat oh my god, Michael had the funniest name for this deck, but we'll just call it Zoomerfy. I honestly don't know if you should be playing that deck at the event, period. It's a very popular deck. It's very easy to play to an extent. And I think a lot of people are going to be picking it up. It's just I explained it like this to you in our closing thoughts with Michael. It's kind of like playing Kano, except you don't actually have to draw relevant pieces to your combo. They just exist on your armor. So it's a pretty wild deck.
I mean, we say this every time, and then Prism's still going to show up. So
oh yeah, Prism's number one on my list. I'm taking Prism to a PT win this time. No, I don't know, but Prism is a legitimate discussion that's going on in testing. So I'm gonna meme on it less this in the lead up to this Pro Tour.
Sure. I feel like I'm so removed from
Bolton still sucks. So. Go ahead.
Road to National season is over. The cut to 90-day XP has happened by the time the pod drops. So big congratulations to all those who have qualified. Felt very competitive this season. A lot of people in my area who play a reasonable amount, were actually like sweating on like XP invites. A lot of, it felt like there were less spots at Road to Nationals this year. I don't know if there was less Road to Nationals or what it was in my particular area, but I actually think what it is overall is we've just got more players in the game playing competitively since last time around with Nationals. So, everyone really earning their invites this time around, which is great to see.
Very interesting. My experience was the complete opposite. I wonder if that's like a dichotomy between the US and Australia right now. But not in like a super bad way.
You're not going to nationals.
Well, no, it's just like people were definitely not like I didn't feel like people were sweating. And our first Road to National season was extremely competitive, and the amount of people that showed up was like 2 to 3 times as many. So like it was a stark difference from that. It felt very casual to that, because back then Road to Nationals was the top competitive format that you could be in. So it actually felt super casual. There was a lot less people, not in like a bad way, but it's just funny hearing it from your side where you're like, all these things have gone up, where on our side, or at least in my experience here in Texas, it was down. But it is, we are comparing it with Road to National Season 1, which was an absolute insane season with events of like 50 to 100 pretty consistently in this area.
Well, I guess actually, sorry, you got Road to Nationals in season 1. Must be nice. So, I guess that's the other contrast, is we didn't have Road to Nationals, and they were all online. No tunics in Australia, unfortunately. So if you own a Rainbow Foil extended art tunic in Australia, you've done well somehow. Still a bit bitter that we didn't get those given out for season 2, but it's what it is. Brendan, what about Fitness Challenge? Any update on that as we close out July? We're basically, we're one day removed from August.
Yep. So closing out the Fab Fitness Challenge this month, it's been incredible. We've consistently talked about on the pod, just like, especially in our Patreon Discord, sort of the community and the engagement has been awesome. I just want to give, we are going to be announcing winners, I think, on next week's pod, as well as the prizes, but I have sort of picked out a few special people while we wait for that. I do want to do a couple shout outs. So big shout out to Tebow. I know we mentioned him at the beginning, but his update on the last call was pretty impressive. I think this is his first time really starting to exercise, which is incredible. And he's stuck with it. And I know he's down like 30 plus pounds, which is just ridiculous. And he's wrote some very nice messages about kind of his positive experience and plans to continue with that. So that just makes me feel very good. Also in our Discord, there's Alex C and Zachary. These guys, I always know they're going to be on the calls. we have some group calls in the Arenal Pass Patreon Discord where we kind of debrief on the Fab Fitness channels. These two are always there, and they're also very consistent with like daily posting. They post everything they eat, all the workouts they do, and then are constantly helping people out. And I know they inspired me to, really try hard. So just some shout outs to some people that have been, very active in our Discord. And next week we'll be announcing winners, and, hopefully we can get some cool content to sort of support those people that have, put a lot of effort into this challenge.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it. It's been a really great experience, the wider community as well. And I would just want to give a special shout out to all of the other content creators who jumped aboard, everyone on Fab Twitter who got involved, and of course just everyone who took part and did Fab Fitness for July. I'm sure we'll see it back again sometime soon. But yeah, some awesome stories coming out of it. I just want to say, lastly, Brendan, we've got a few gameplay videos that have gone up in the past couple of weeks. Me and Brendan took some time out to do some gameplay. Get those videos up, and there's a couple of matches with some of the top decks from the sort of current class constructed meta up on our YouTube channel. If you aren't already subscribed, we're closing in on 5,000 subs, so drop us a subscription if you don't mind. Maybe you listen on podcast platforms, jump across to YouTube and drop us a sub. We'd greatly appreciate it. Also, a new deck tech. We had one that you did, Brendan, with Tara Patel. There's also a sideboard guide up on our Patreon for that, and you recently recorded one with Yuki, which I'm sure will be going up sometime soon. Brendan. So yeah, I've got a couple of really cool class constructed deck techs with, of course, as we always do, up on our Patreon, our full sideboard guides and deck guides, and both our guests have been lovely enough to provide those for our Patreons as well. You can join our Patreon, of course, by just clicking on the link below. We do monthly additional podcasts, sort of extra content, as well as all those deck guides that we provide whenever we make a sort of deck tech video. But yeah, thanks again to all of our patrons. Brendan, sorry, Brendan.
Sorry, I just want to quickly mention, because I actually think this happened with the last time we talked to the deck tech, but the deck tech with Yuki is actually a Lexi deck tech. I think you omitted the hero with Herrick as well. But yeah, it's a Lexi deck tech.
It's Yuki. What else is it going to be? It's Yuki. What else is she, not that Yuki, not that she doesn't play other heroes and other decks, but, she's synonymous with Lexi, so I just assumed everyone would believe so.
Yeah, well, just in case people didn't know, yeah, it is a Lexi deck tech, and a deck that, may come into its own in this Fi-dominated meta that we're seeing at the moment.
Very true, very true. Look, we do have some amazing Commander Cookout questions on the back burner, if you get what I mean, which we are going to be bringing to you over the next couple of weeks via our Discord and some YouTube questions and email questions we've had. But we do have an amazing interview with Michael to talk all through Uprising Limited and pick his brain. Brendan fires him some hard questions, and I want to make sure we have maximum time for that. So no Commander Cookout this week, but we will be back next week with some of these great questions. If you do want to get a question and get yourself in line for a snag off the Barbie with one of these questions, you can email them to us at arsenalpassfab@gmail.com, tweet at us, DM us, drop them in the YouTube comments below, let us know it's a Command and Cookout question, or if you're one of our patrons in the Discord, there is a Discord channel for Command and Cookout questions. But Brendan, I mean, without further ado, I think we bring Michael in and we get this Uprising Limited brain picking session with Michael underway.
Let's do it. All right, everybody, we are joined with Michael Feng here, a good friend of mine, hosted me when I came over to New York, and then I'm about to read off, some of his accomplishments, but I think his the most important one actually came soon after that trip, where he won the Team Sealed tournament over there in Ohio. The reigning champions. But under his belt as well, he is a calling champion of Cincinnati, Tales of Aria Limited 2021, finalist at U.S. Nationals in 2021. He's gotten second at the Battle Hardened in Syracuse, and a top 32 at the Pro Tour. So a very, very good player, but a lot more than that as well, because also a content creator, which I didn't know for a very long time, Michael, has a YouTube channel called Cards with Them. I know you do a lot of box openings. You tend to play it down quite a bit. You didn't really mention 14-hour streams and all this crazy stuff, which I got to see in person. And on top of that, he's the co-host of the new podcast Attack for 20, which is sort of burst on the scene recently, providing high-level flesh and blood strategy discussion, specifically drafts, which we're going to be going over today. So yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and let's hop into Limited. Michael, just give me your general thoughts on the format, your kind of high level view.
Yeah, sure. Well, first, thanks for having me, Brendan, Hayden. So Uprising Draft, we're like a month into the season, I guess. I think the easiest way to summarize it is the format. We like to joke that it could be better, it could be worse. It's definitely a format that is very tight. So your decisions count like from turn one. Sometimes like the game is lost before you even have a turn. Just going first, going second. Like for example, in the 5 mirror, if you lose a dice roll and you're going second, you have you're going first. There's like a slight amount of advantage and disadvantage. But sometimes you can flip the script on that. Like if you go first as 5 and you kind of catch the other 5 with their pants down and you get in maybe a little bit more damage, like 5 or 6 damage in that range. Sometimes you also win then. So like it's definitely a very tight format. I don't feel like I felt other formats limited wise as punishing. And it's also tight in the sense that a lot of games are down to the wire. 1 point of damage is all that matters. So I guess if I had to summarize it, it's just like a very tight format. It's not the best beginner format at all. Mm-hmm. Like I don't think it's a very good format to get new players into the game.
What do you think about the sort of competitive integrity of the format? Do you think it's a good format for competitive events? Do you feel like you have a lot of agency as the player? And do you feel like your preparation leads you to a higher win rate and just a better play experience? Like, does preparation matter?
Preparation definitely matters. I think just in general, Flesh and Blood is a game that preparation just helps a lot. It decreases variance. There's less variance in this game than Magic, in my opinion. Uprising, in terms of actually competitive integrity, we'd have to compare it to other formats. I
Mhm.
think, I guess the best answer to your question. I think compared to Tails, I feel like Uprising actually has more integrity in the sense that if you're like better at drafts with Uprising, you will get rewarded a little bit more. And I say that with like this weird caveat because Uprising is also in this weird format where there's only 3 decks you can draft, whereas in Tails there was like 4.5, 5, and you could do like these like pivots and stuff during the draft. Whereas in Uprising, like the only type of pivot you really do is like a hard pivot. Um, but after drafting this format enough, I feel like those hard pivots are like what separates like your draft from going like 1-2 to at least like a 2-1. Um, and I think that's I think very few people are able to execute that well. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Michael? Where do you see? You're a Magic player, right? That's your background
Yeah,
is Magic.
yeah.
So you've played quite a bit of limited in other games.
Mhm.
How do you compare it, just maybe first of all, limited in Flesh and Blood, so Flesh and Blood draft versus maybe say Magic draft? Where do you feel they sit in terms of comparisons to each other? And then for this Uprising format, is there anything you think back to your time in Magic that you compare a set like Uprising to? Like, have you experienced a set like Uprising before, or does this
Yeah.
feel completely different the way that you have to draft? Because for me, the difference between Tails, the difference between Welcome to Wraith, there is a lot of difference in this format. There's a lot of different nuances.
I Ixalan or
Everyone says that.
Rivals of Ixalan. I mean, it just in general, Flesh and Blood draft feels very Ixalan like in the sense that there are just tribes. You pick a tribe, and like late in pack 1, by pack 2, maybe like I've stayed as open as pack 2, like first couple picks in Uprising. But the moment you have picked, it's just gravy after that. Like there's very few decision points you make after that. Um, and that's kind of how Ixalan felt. Ixalan was actually to me almost a little bit worse, even though it had 4 tribes. You had to commit like by pick 1, pack 1, pick 5 ish, and you just had to pray, like fingers crossed, please. No, like only like 2 or 3 guys in my tribe, or at max like 1 or 2, and just hope to get there. Um, Definitely that's like the format that I always think about whenever I'm talking about. That's how I explain Flesh and Blood Draft actually to a lot of Magic players. And I know that that's not a very popular way to do it. It's not a really like might not be the most attractive way, but I just gotta like manage expectations because a lot of times it does feel like that.
Is Sorry, I'm going to steal some bit of your thunder here, Brendan. I have a question for Michael that I feel like is really important before we move forward, because I think it's going to dictate some of the future discussions we have about Uprising Draft. Is 14 cards in this format a positive or a negative per pack?
I think it's a super negative. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm saying Uprising is tight. It's just you get punished very quickly, and very easily. And that's also why I say the format isn't as beginner friendly as I would like. Um, and I think that if you draft it a lot, you just have this like huge self-awareness of how tight the slots are. And for the people that are truly trying to stay open and not like just forcing a hero, which we'll probably talk about during the podcast, like you have a very limit. You do have some like wiggle room, but it's very limited, and you have to be really strategic about it.
Yeah, I wanted to preface before we got into it to talk about this, because I actually think the more and more I think about this format, 14 versus 15 cards in other formats is one of the biggest things about Uprising, and it's one of the things that make it the most difficult to draft. It's one of the things that are giving you these early decision points that are so important. Because, and Michael, maybe you can elaborate on this, or Brendan, if you want to, like 3 cards out of a draft. It doesn't sound like that much, right? Like I only made 3 cards different, but if you think about it, 3 cards that could be having to decide what you're going to draft 3 picks earlier. Ultimately, it can result in you having to play, 1, 2 crack baubles potentially in your deck if the draft doesn't go the way you want it to. And if the earlier and earlier you have to make decisions, the less information you have about cards coming around the table, about what the person to your right is drafting, right? And if everyone feels the same way, everyone could be making decisions a lot earlier than maybe you would in other formats.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just crazy. Flesh and Blood, you actually have to play and draft 30 cards to an extent, give or take. Obviously, with Phoenix Flames, it's a little bit less. Magic, you just have to draft like 23, because like you present 40 card decks, but you roughly would have like 17 lands. But in Flesh and Blood, you actually have to draft those resource cards. So like having 3 less cards is like huge. I don't really like it. I wish that these were also 15 card packs.
What
Thoughts, Brendan?
Yeah, I mean, I think it feels noticeably worse than 15 card packs, but I also don't think that take is very controversial, and I'd be very surprised to hear anybody say that they thought it felt better from a draft experience perspective. There's something you said that I want to sort of riff off of, which mentioned staying open. What does it mean to stay open in Uprising? Is this picking Phantasm Breakers like Brothers in Arms? Is it picking Oasis Respite? Or is it maybe picking the Red Ether Ice Vein as your pack one pick one because you know it's a powerful card in Icelander, or the Spellfire Cloak, or maybe a Necria or something like that? What does it mean to stay open, and how long can you do it?
I consider all the cards that you just said like cards that I would take, and I could still consider myself quote unquote staying open. And I think when I say staying open, I just mean like mentally. Like I have not mentally committed to a hero in this draft yet. I've taken a Necria. The next pack, I look at it and I take a blue Aether Ice Vein. I don't feel uncomfortable. I feel very like I still feel like I can 3-0 this pod. You know what I mean? Even into like pick 6, I'm still like looking at the pack. If I don't get a signal, or I don't get any, I hate saying the word signal. I want to say something else. Like I just like don't get any identifiers in the pack of like something that someone else took. Like there's the back is a 3-2-2 split, and it's still like a 2-2-2 split. So they could have the 5 people passing to me, they could have taken a common, but I don't know which one. And then like it's missing 2 generics, missing a rare, missing a foil, missing an equipment, and I just like can't figure out what people are taking yet. I'm still comfortable at that point. It's around pick 7, the pack right before I get my wheel, is usually when I start making like a judgment call.
Mm-hmm. How much do you value the wheel in this format?
I didn't value it much at the beginning, but I value it a ton right now, because I will like the first pack. I actually think that there's not enough time in call drafts for the very first, like the first 2 or 3 picks. Right now we're getting, I think, 55 seconds, and I think I'm like just enough. It's like just enough, but it's a little tight for me because I am staring at my first pack. Even if I have like, so like I consider Sash of Sanikai like a windmill slam. I'm super happy to pack one, pick one that. But even if I have that, I'm like staring at the rest of the pack and just trying my best, because I'm not very good at memorizing. So I'm trying my best to like remember everything so that the moment I get a wheel, I just like can mentally kind of build a picture of what was taken, if that makes sense. And that helps me a lot because it's like the first few picks that really push people in a single direction. Like even the first couple picks to the people that I'm passing to might send them into 5, and I have no like it doesn't matter what I do in pick 7, 8, 9, 10, they're gonna be 5 players, because in the first 6 picks they're taking 5 cards. Like that's sometimes just gonna happen, and I just kind of need to mentally prepare for that. So the wheel is really important to me.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me about the evolution of that ideology. Right, you said you didn't value it as much in the beginning. What changed your mind specifically?
I think like part of it was just like figuring out the pack breakdown and just having a better like familiarity with that, and being able to know like, oh, like this is what I had, so like this is what the wheel looks like. I think the other part is I have a keen sense of trying to set up a cooperative partner either on my right or my left. Sometimes it's great. Both my right and my left are cooperative partners, aka we're not drafting the same hero. Sometimes I can only set that up with one of the two. But I'm always in Uprising Draft, I'm trying to set up a situation where at least one of these pack 2 or pack 3, I have at least one person directly across from me who's not drafting the hero I'm in. And I'm like actively trying to set up that cooperation. I'm not trying to bamboozle the guy I'm passing to. I'm not trying to hook him in, then trick him. I do want to actually cooperate to some extent.
Not team draft.
Yeah, it's not team draft. It's not team draft, exactly.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about, because you talked about identifiers and the wheel of the pack, and a lot of people will be familiar with them, but if they're not, do you want to just tell us a bit about what those identifiers are, Michael? Like, what is the pack distribution in Uprising? I know you've talked about it in your own pod. I think we've discussed a little bit, Brendan, but maybe just for the audience, Michael, just to recap what some of those identifiers are for you.
Yeah, for sure. So the first 3 cards of every Uprising pack is some mix of generic, ice, and draconic. And when I say ice, I just mean straight up just ice action. So like Cold Snap, for example, not Ice Wizard, not Wizard, just ice. We've opened a lot of packs at this point, and I also have a box opening channel, and I do live streams where I open a lot of them. So I feel like I've opened enough to say with confidence that there's always a generic. If there isn't, it's a print like anomaly. Like that's not what was intended. So in the first three, always one generic, and then the other two cards can be another generic and draconic, or some permutation of generic, draconic ice, or generic ice, or generic draconic. After that, the fourth card is an equipment. It's always going to be common, just some common equipment. There's only so many. I don't know if there's something you also want to talk about. We're just talking about pack breakdowns now, but we've also opened enough packs to also do box collation. So, for example, that common equipment, there's usually 2 common equipment of every single kind that will be opened in a sealed booster display of 24 packs. With some exceptions, some will have 3. Rarely will one ever have just 1, and that's not including the foils. So that's just something, I don't know, a little cherry on top. We can talk about that. You can ask me more questions about that later. The 5th card is a rare, always a rare. The 6th card is a rare or better, so that could be your majestic. The 7th card is your foil, and that's half of the pack. And then the other half of the pack is what the generic the class specific commons. So it's a 2-2-3 split 99.99% of the time. There are definitely exceptions, and those exceptions happen roughly 1 in every 2 cases. And those are, once again, I think they're print errors or just not by design. The 2-2-3 split is 2 Draconic Illusionist or 2 Draconic Ninja plus 2 Icelander cards, and one of those 3 heroes will get an extra bonus common.
Third card.
Yeah, but even then, there's a collation thing where per display, on average, 16 of every 24 boosters, the 2-2-3 split, the 3 will be Icelander. Just something we've noticed. And then, so that's 16, so there's 8 packs left, and roughly it's 4 and 4 for the other heroes. But like a very, very high percentage chance that the 2-2-3 split will have a third Icelander card.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I think it's really, a lot of people have talked about it as being an important part of this draft, more than I've heard in any Flesh and Blood draft format so far. This idea of understanding pack distribution because of the 3 heroes. And I honestly think the biggest part of it, people are really starting to understand, is 14 versus 15 cards. And that comes back to why I wanted to ask you that at the start, because it's, like I say, it makes your decision have to happen earlier. One of my favorite things to do, I don't know if you do this, Michael or Brendan, one of my favorite things to do is, at the end of a draft, before everyone starts to move away, I'm just like, okay, I just like to recap. What is the person on my left? I'm pretty sure they're Fire. I'm pretty sure the person downstream from them is in Iceland. I'm pretty sure the person to my right is in Drome, I say. And try and understand, did I draft my seat the way I thought I did? Like you were saying before, trying to have these cooperative partners. Am I in the seat I thought I was in? And then sometimes, it doesn't play out. Often you find this out pretty quickly, right? Pack 2, you find those identifiers. You realize, actually, I thought I put this person to my left on Fire. There's a wizard card missing from this pack. Actually, not what I thought happened.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I somewhat enjoy doing that. I think for me, at this point, it's very clear. By pack 3, it's like super clear usually what's going on. And by the end of pack 2, I already kind of know what the person that's passing to me is. It's usually like the wild cards are like the 2 seats away from me, people, because sometimes I have less. The further you're away from me, like the less control I have, and the less like signaling that you can give me. Like I did a draft where I am Fi, Dromai is passing to me, Icelander is passing to the Dromai, another Icelander is passing to Icelander, and after me it's just a train of 4 Fis. So like
that's a good one to go off of. So I want to ask you, do you think the general Fab community has the right idea regarding the format? And specifically, I mean the meme of forcing Fi.
So I think that if you are not that experienced of Uprising, and this is literally advice I give people that like at my LGS or whatever, I'm like, for your first draft, just force Fi. Just do it. You'll learn a lot of fundamentals. The best way you can learn how to play Icelander is an Icelander B2 a couple times. And you'll understand what tempo is playing that game out, or lack thereof. Fi is super easy to draft, lowest requirements, floor is really low. It's just like I don't think the community is wrong in the sense that forcing Fi is somewhat of a strategy. I just do think that at the top tables, once you get to the upper tables, one of the reasons why forcing Fi isn't as good is like the moment 2 people or 3 people in a pod are forcing Fi, like you can really win that pod just playing Dromai or Icelander. Like you have, like, it can't be something that you just can't do. You know what I mean? Like if you're forcing Fi, or you have like a bias towards Fi, and it's like pack 1, pick 3, and there are no 5 commons left in the pack, like you need to be able. That's like that is your draft to win. And if you don't have the reps on Dromai and Icelander, it's just like you're just throwing away wins. So I don't think the community is that wrong. I don't want to criticize and like patronize because I do think that Fi is just super strong. I told this story actually. Yunji and I Attack for 20 get started in the Michael Hamilton, Roger Bodie, the Manor Pat test earlier this week. And I told this story at Utrecht. We had a Magic player or a friend of a friend who's a former current Magic player, still Magic player, who just started learning like 2 weeks ago. And we test drafted at night and we did some drafts, side event drafts, and he just forced Fi every time. He's like, all I know is how to play Fi. I don't know how to play Dromai. I don't know how to play Icelander. I'm just gonna force Fi until I die. And he played in the Battle Hearted, made top 8, which is not easy. There were like 100 people. You have to 3-0 your first pod, 2-0 your next pod, and lose in the finals. That's the only people that top 8'd that Battle Hardened. And I'm like, there's some efficacy to this. Are you going to always win? Maybe not, but I think it's like hard to like go 0-3 forcing Fi.
How do you
So I don't
see?
know.
What do you think a pod can support in terms of hero representation? How many
Yeah.
Fis, how many Icelanders, how
Yeah.
many Dromais for the decks to be decent?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer your question, but then I'm going to also have a disclaimer after that. So in terms of what I think, I still kind of stick by what like a number I kind of threw at you when you were over at my place, and that's the 1.5, 2.5, 3.5 theory. And that's every pod can support 1.5 Dromais, 2.5 Icelanders, and 3.5 Fis that are all like decent. Or the way I like to say it actually is that's how many players worth of quality cards there are per pod. And Dromai is the least because Dromai has like kind of the most amount of, in my opinion, kind of dead cards. They either don't block, like Sandcover Yellow, or they only block 2, like a yellow Skittering Sand. Like those are kind of like cards just like I don't want them in my Dromai deck. But if you're like the third Dromai, you're gonna have to play some of them just to kind of get by. Icelander, I feel like there's 2.5 pools. It could be arguable that 2.5 is closer to 2, but I like to say 2.5 because Icelander, a lot of times you can block with almost every, like you have a lot more block 3s. There's just no sand cover. Sand cover is kind of like the biggest, like to me, the biggest culprit. Because there's gonna be 7-ish sand covers per pod, and it's just like, I don't know, sometimes they're just like crack bobbles. And then, Fi, like you can support 3.5. And if you're like the second Dromai, there's going to be some tension, but you can still have good decks. At that point, here's my disclaimer. You could have 2 Dromais and you could have 1 Dromai that's just an unplayable deck.
Mhm.
And you could have 1 Dromai that has like a nuts deck. Like there are 1.5 Dromai pools of cards that are going to be in the 24 packs, but depending on luck, depending on positioning, one of them could just get them. Like it does not even like who's passing to who, like the seeding. Like it could be like one of them is downstream, but in pack 2, the Necria, the red rakes, the red ember balls, those are all open and they're just feasting on them, right? Like it's that's like a little bit of a luck thing, but I do think that like I'm still standing by the 1.5, 2.5, 3.5 in terms of actual sheer numbers.
There's also a piece around just average pack distribution. And, take Iceland, for example. You talked about 2.5, maybe it's closer to 2.25, whatever you want to say, right, in terms of that. But
yeah.
some drafts, there's going to be slightly more yellow cards. Some drafts, there's going to be slightly less yellow cards. And that's going to dictate that kind of, to an extent, right? Like it's not massive because even across 24 packs, distribution should even out to some degree. There's enough cards that you start to get like closer to a mean average. But there is that plays into it a little bit to some degree, right? Like it's not cut and dry every single draft, and then add in where everyone's sat in terms of that as well.
So it's actually that's not something I get too tilted by. I think nowadays I used to. The first couple of times I was trying to draft Icelander, I'd be like, why? Like I open a pack, legit, no lie, 6 yellow Icelander cards.
Yep.
Like both the rares were yellow. There were 3 in the back, and then the first 3 cards was a yellow cold snap, and I was just like I don't want any of this now. I'm gonna wheel this. I'm in Icelander already. It's like pack 2, and so I just take the yellow block 3s. But like, what we've kind of discovered just from opening a lot of packs and kind of just collating the cards, like it's actually like pretty consistent. Like it's only +1 -1 in terms of like the number of blues, yellows, and reds you're going to see for all the different heroes at the common level. If like rares, foils will all, I guess we never count that because those are just wild cards. But at the common level, it's very consistent. So if you open a pack of yellows, there are going to be some reds, there are going to be blues. They're going to be in the pod. You might not see them based off luck and your seeding, but they should be in there. And actually, this is one of the things that I think is a little bit more advanced in terms of drafting Uprising, and it's going to be applicable to drafting any of the other Flesh and Blood formats as long as they continue with the type of collation. But like in pack one, if you're drafting Fi and the packs just are just like blue, yellow, like you open a blue yellow, you get past the blue yellow Fi cards, there's going to be some packs that have reds. Like it's just so happens not yet, and so that's why I think like people that actually force Fi get a little edge there because packs that look like complete garbage for Fi in the first pack might not necessarily be bad to just take those blues if you really want to hedge and be in Fi. Yeah, basically collation is a thing. If there's a lot of yellows, don't fret too much. If you kind of stick to it, there will be blues and reds. Just make sure that you're actually kind of in that open seat.
Yeah, so unfortunately, it might be in the packs that you don't want them to be in, but that's pack distribution is going to happen. Yeah, agree.
Yeah, been on the wrong end of that one. So I guess this is taking a break from the more eloquent breakdowns of the format. Let's go super simple here. How would you rank the heroes in terms of power level?
Oh, so this is gonna be I actually think a really good Dromai deck will win the pod. So I don't know if I can give Dromai first place in terms of a rank, but Dromai breaks the rules the most, just has the most raw damage potential. So like a really good Dromai deck, in my opinion, will just win the pod. It's just like almost oppressive, in my opinion. To me, I would put Fi second, which is kind of sad because now I've just said that both Draconic heroes are kind of like in the top tier. And that's because of the consistency. And less so because of like oppressive like power spikes. It's just consistency. Like Fi can deal 11 to 14 damage very consistently. 11 if you're like literally starting for blue sometimes. No other hero in Uprising can do that. I actually rank Icelander the last, but that doesn't mean that like you can't 3-0 a pod of Icelander. I've seen that a lot actually. But I think Icelander is like has the highest degree of things can potentially go wrong. Like the Icelander deck really needs a decent amount of blues, or like some red 0 for 3s. But you have kind of like this really dichotomous, or you have this really weird matchup spectrum where against Dromai, like no matter how good of a player you are, sometimes you just lose, and it's very frustrating. I think that's like one of the most frustrating parts of the format, by the way. It's like even losing the dice roll as Fi in a Fi mirror isn't as frustrating to when they just have the Uvia on turn 2, and you as an Icelander, like your entire draft, you never saw a popper, and you have to like, I don't know, you might have like a yellow Scar for Scar, and that's like the only way you can kill the Uvia, and you're gonna get fatigued. Like if you don't kill it, like in the next 2 turns, it's just like so hard not to get fatigued. So I don't know, like that's kind of the way I rank it. But in actual draft, I'm like not like disappointed to be Icelander, but Icelander is also really scary to draft, and that's because of the 2-2-3 split. I have to take a leap of faith sometimes that Icelander is either open or not open, because a signal that an Icelander drafter would give to you if they're passing immediately to you is you would see the 2-2-2 in the back because they likely took one of the commons, but they might have taken a ninja common. Like you don't really know, but 16 out of 24 of the time they did. So that kind of just makes me a little scared. So 2/3 out of the time, if they're potentially an Icelander, usually that's good enough for me. So that pack 1, pick 6, pick 7, if I still see 2-2-2, I'm taking the best Dromai or the best Fi card. If there isn't a really good Dromai card, they're both yellows, I'm taking the blue 5 card. Like that's kind of like my just kind of like evaluation of a draft at that stage.
Yeah. How do you how important is equipment in this format, and which pieces are the best or most impactful?
Okay, so equipment is something I feel like I can talk about really, really well. I feel like we've drafted enough to a point where I feel really comfortable talking about some of what I'm saying. Like I don't like I won't say that everything I say I'll have that much confidence, but with equipment, I feel really confident with how I feel. Um, I think equipment is extremely important, but there's kind of like this tier list. So Sash of Sandikai is kind of like God tier. Uh, I have literally did a draft where I opened Flamescale Furnace Rainbow Foil, and there was a Sash of Sandikai, and I was still thinking. That's how important it is to me. Even though Flamescale Furnace blocks like 2 and 1, there are hands that just are like so much more playable. You can win straight games off of Sash. To me, it's just like the most important piece. Like if I'm drafting Draconic, that's like the number one checkbox. If I get that pack one, pick one, I'm so happy. I feel invincible actually. I feel like I can win the pod just from that. Spellfire Cloak is actually to me like a couple of steps below some of the other equipment. And that's partially because I do think that Icelander is a little bit scarier to draft. I never am kind of looking to force Icelander unless I like really know the people in my pod really well and they're all like dirty 5 forcers. No, I'm just kidding. But it's just the way the drafts have been working for me. I typically am not like as excited to pack one, pick one as Spellfire Cloak. The actual second common equipment that I really, really like is Heatwave. Um, because if we're assuming that there's like 3 or 4 5s per pod, and I kind of alluded to this, and I'm kind of mentioning it again now, but the average collation of a box is about 2. Occasionally, very occasionally, about 2 to 3 of the equipment will actually have 3 copies. If you see a Heatwave and you have any inkling of wanting to be in Fi, you should take it because their at max will be another, and it's very unlikely you'll ever see it again because there's going to be there's usually going to be like 3 5s, maybe even 4 in your pod. So those 2 equipment to me are like on a tier above everything else. Just because it's like you're not gonna like randomly get them. Whereas like for example, Silent Stilettos or Silken Form, which I think is also numerically very strong. Those are cards that if you are doing things right and everyone on the table is evaluating cards correctly, like there's usually like 1 or 2 Dromites, maybe 2, maybe 3, but that's actually a card possible that you'll actually kind of wheel, or not wheel, but like kind of get late. Um, in terms of actual numerical like numbers, the equipment are like huge. Um, like Quell at the very least is usually you can get like an Iron Rot worth of value, which is a lot more value than you could get from anything from Tales of Aria minus like Mark of Lightning. But like Heat Wave, sometimes you're getting +2. That's like a Goliath Gauntlet. That's really good. This format's really tight. A lot of the games are decided by 1 or 2 health. If your equipment is giving you like a +2 advantage in any direction, it's just like ginormous. And also another reason why I think equipment is important is you only have 3 actual slots. Unless you're at center and you're playing the glacial headpiece, which is also another piece I think is super low. Like that's like I've seen Icelanders just like pass that because they don't even want it sometimes, although I think that might be incorrect. I think equipment's really important. I think the reason why is because they're often giving you +1/+2. And if you can just like if you draft Quell and you can make a manufacture a situation where you can make that basically an Iron Rot, like that's like you started the game at 21, and these are like the small advantages, which are like ginormous in limited, especially once you get to like the more competitive day 2 blah 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 scenarios.
Why, Michael? Why is Heatwave? I think this is a question people would ask themselves. Why is Heatwave so high on your list when you have something like Quelling Sleeves? Is that not a direct replacement in your eyes?
For sure. So Heatwave, Heatwave is like the easiest to, in my opinion, to get +2 value from. So all the Quell, like it's so hard to get more than +2. And what I mean by +2 is like you would have played a normal turn out, and in that normal turn, you were going to attack with 2 Phoenix Flames. If you pop the Heat Wave in that turn, you get +2 more damage that turn with the Heat Wave. But most quelling equipment, like it's really hard to manufacture a situation where you're getting more than 1 health advantage. And so, like a good example of how to get 1 health advantage is you have a blue that blocks 2, and the very first attack that a Fi does to you, you like quell, and you actually use all 3 resources. Well, you got that blue card to block 3 when it normally would have blocked 2, and that sometimes is game. Like actually, and I think like 30% of my games are decided by someone correctly identifying a quell situation, using it, and having that 1 life advantage. Or I noticed that my opponent did not quell, and they could have, and this could have been a totally different game, even though it's like only a one life swing. Like if you can make quell just like it's like that meme. Corporate wants to identify the difference between quell and like iron rod. If you can make that the same, that's usually good enough. Obviously against Icelander, it's a little bit different, but usually against the two draconic heroes, like you're just trying to manufacture situations where that's a thing. Now, if you're playing Five Mirror, sometimes you just like it just never is relevant. That's definitely possible. Because of that, Heat Wave is just so much more flexible. Like you're gonna have a situation. Almost every single Fire limited deck will have a situation where they have two Phoenix Flames. Sometimes it's just because you have another Phoenix Flame in your deck. You're playing at least two, and you draw it. To me, that's like it's go time. Let's get my hand on the Heat Wave. We're ready to go. You know, like just that +2 is just huge. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think I led the witness a little bit on that one, but that's the answer I was looking for.
Yeah,
I think it's an interesting conversation because to me, Quell is like the most interesting mechanic we've had on a piece of equipment in this game so far, and it's one that I just really like to talk about and have these discussions about because it is. I think it's a unique place to be in a limited format to have this piece of equipment there. If you have the quelling sleeves, it's a quell only, right? How do you make the best decision on those, or quelling slippers, whatever it is? And then you have this other equipment that has these decision points built in of like Heat Wave, and I love that. So yeah, I think that's a great answer. Thanks, Michael.
awesome.
All right, so before we get into the heroes, Michael, I just want to ask you about going second in this format. How important is it, and what are the exceptions?
So I think it's really important. I think there should be a really good reason why you would want to go first. Um, I think one of the other things you should think about is not only do I want to go first or second, and also sorry, it's not just do I want to go first or second. It's also does my opponent want to go first or 2nd. And so sometimes I say, hey, I just want to go second every time, and they're like, but why? Like I'm playing Icelander. Like I kind of want to go first. Arsenal, blah blah blah. I'm like, I don't want the Fi to go second. Is like the retort I'll give. And I like for example, when I'm playing Icelander, I actually prefer to go second. When I'm against Fi, I just don't want them to go second. I don't want them to have a turn against me where I'm like kind of having to decide between blocking and not blocking in order to have another turn on my end. I think Helios Meter really changes that equation. If that card did not exist, if I'm playing Icelander, I always want to go first. I know that they're going to only have one Arcane Barrier. I know they're going to have some Quell. Great. You make them use the Quell right now, right? Like, but Helios Meter being free just changes that equation for me. And so almost in every matchup, I want to go second. The only exception I have, and I'm not even 100% sure on this, though let's call it 95% sure, is the Icelander Mirror. I think as Icelander Mirror, I think you want to go first. This is partially because most normal Icelander decks can only really deal damage via their weapon and arcane. They won't have drafted too many attack actions. And so Helios Mitre is actually a really important part of the equation, especially preventing like an Aether Ice Vein trigger, which sometimes can be backbreaking, but also just kind of bailing you out when you have like an all blue hand, you're being attacked by a red. And you're like, I cannot actually deal damage with this hand. I just want to pitch to Mitre and go to the next hand. That's like the only exception. Otherwise, I think it's a go second format. Even if I'm playing Dromai and I go against a Fi, and the Fi's like, oh, I don't want you to set up a dragon, whatever, and they somehow make me go second, I'm like stoked. So,
all right. So heading into Fi, I had kind of had my first bullet point in a lot of these being potential archetypes, but I think we discussed at the top of the pod, and most of us probably agree that the archetypes are really just Fi, Icelander, and Dromai. I think Dromai, you can maybe have a choice between picking up Centipies or picking up Dragons sometimes. But other than that, I haven't seen too many different archetypes per se.
yeah, for sure. I think it's like a little bit of playstyle. Dromai and Icelander both have a little bit more flexibility. I really enjoy actually part of Utrecht. I played against like 3 Dromais, and one of the first Dromais I played against, I had a feeling. I actually asked them mid game. I was like, "How many cards do you present?" And they were like, "I presented 36." And I was like, "I see," because they were blocking like every turn, like aggressively blocking. I would attack for 2, they'd still block a 3, and that immediately tells me, okay, the rest of their hand is just all 3 blocks, and they just red dust up me after that. Like, I really enjoy that there are kind of different play styles, but that's kind of at the mercy of the way you draft. He was also playing like the Ember Moss Centipies. Like a play cycle was like he would block with 2 cards, block 6, and just red Ember on me. That was the whole thing. All he was trying to do. And that was like I did the math, and I was like, you got 14 total like block or deal damage from your 4 cards, and I was attacking with like yellows and blues and like barely getting like 8. Like my entire turn was like 8 damage, and he would just 2-card hit me.
Yeah, kind of reminds me of the old Oldham sort of deck, the 3 for 7, similar play style. So regarding Fi, what do you see as some of like the key cards? And I guess you can add a sort of addendum onto the answer with what cards are you past later in the pack, so you're like, oh my god, this hero's open.
I think the only real answer to that, to the what cards I'm past kind of later in the pack, and I feel like the hero's open, is I just get past like a 5 blue, because I feel like at this point everyone, even like a first time drafter will know that like a red Ronin Renegade or a red Soaring Strike, like that's like a top tier pick. If somehow I'm past one of those, it's like pack one, pick, I want to say like 7. That is like alarms go off. I'm like, what is going on? I mean, I would recommend doing this every single pack. In the first pack, I'm like counting like what has been taken from this pack so far, right? And if I somehow do the count and I'm like, there's a high chance that there's like 2 Icelanders that are passing to me, which is like one of the only ways that you'd get like a red starter starter in that late of a pick. I'm like, okay, I'm in the 5 spot, and I start thinking. Actually, I don't know if this is kind of deeper than what you're asking, but immediately I start thinking, is the guy I'm passing to also on 5 at this point? Like, have I been giving him 5 signals? Like, if I haven't been already kind of taking 5 cards, and if I'm like, maybe not. I mean, at that point, it doesn't matter. It's like I'm gonna take the 5 card as well, but I'm just trying to think, emotionally prepare myself for pack 2. That's like the main thing. Like a 5 blue is usually like a really good indicator. I think that those are underdrafted right now. Because I often find that if you have tide flippers and you have like a good density of blues, like 11 or 12, you can make the Icelander matchup so much smoother. Like the best way to win is to just on average have 1.5 blues in your hand, and you're just like, if they give you some frostbite, you have 2 blues in your hand, you've countered their Arctic Incarceration. So I really value having blues. I have no problem. I've entered pack 3 as a 5 drafter. I have like 1 red starter, but I have like 9 blues, and I'm like, I feel very comfortable.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think about for key cards for Fi?
I think you need like at least the bare minimum 4 red starters. Which, if you think about it, if you're drawing 4 cards, you presented 29 cards, right? If you have 4 red stars, you're getting 1 every other hand. Mm-hmm. So I had a deck that had 4 red starters. I drew 3 of them in my first hand. I did not attack. I arsenaled 1 of them. I'm like, I'm not attacking with this hand. So I think 4 red starters is like if we're talking about a recipe, that's like the bare minimum. If you even want to have a cake that even bakes, like you need to have 4 red starters. You're gonna have some yellow starters if that's the case, but like the 4 red starters are the turns that you actually deal damage to your opponent if they're trying to block. They're the turns that you ideally that's your pivot turn, so to speak. Because the decks that I draft that are 5 decks that I'm like, this is kind of a train wreck. I kind of pivot into like pack 2. I don't have that many starters. Ideally, you have a lot of block 3s, and you're just kind of blocking until you draw the hand. You're like, this is a 15 damage, 16 damage, whatever hand. Like, go, heat wave, kind of take back tempo. So that's the first recipe or ingredient. The other ingredient is just blues, just like a good amount of blues. Every time you're not pitching a blue when you're playing 5, it's like you just neg 3 yourself. Because most of the time when you pitch a blue, that means you also get an Ember Blade. But if you pitch a red, it's like the same turn, just no Ember Blade. And if you pitch a yellow, hopefully you have a sash, but like the yellows are all in a really weird spot. I think early on in the format, I was pretty high on cards like yellow, Brand of Cinderclaw, yellow, the whole line of 0-cost yellows. I'm still like not like too disappointed to draft them, but they've gotten a lot worse now because of having to pitch them. But if you're drafting 5 and you're in like pack 3, and you should know before pack 3 when you do your pack review how many blues you have and how many starters. If you have 9 of blues, take the blues. But once you hit that 9 or 10 level, these yellow Brand of Cinderclaws are they're just good enough. It's just good enough. But really, if I just would give you ingredients, like the way I would look at your draft deck, if you give me a draft, like, hey, like rate my deck, First thing I do, count the red starters. I'm like, got 4 or 5 red starters. It's gonna be a little bit rough. Then I start counting your blues. Then I count your number of 3 blocks. Those are like the because if you don't have enough red starters, ideally you have 3 blocks to kind of buy time. And if you don't have enough 3 blocks, because like the only 3 blocks are like the draconic, like breaking point, critical strike, the draconic line of Cinder Skin Devotion, and Lava Vein Loyalty. Those are just like nice. They just like block 3. You just kind of
Good cards.
like, yeah. I mean, your opponent, if you're, but I'm almost always, by the way, all of these matchups thinking about the 5 mirror, because I feel like statistically you're gonna face the 5 mirror more often than any other matchup, and so that should be the one that you're like the most mentally prepared for. But yeah, in terms of recipes, I think it's just like those 3 elements, and in fact, you can even shorten it. It's just 2 elements: starters and blues.
What sort of ratios do you look for? You mentioned, drafting blues, of course, and of course the four is the base minimum for red starters.
Yeah.
But what about just resource ratios in general? How many blues specifically do you think that deck needs to be good?
Yeah, so this is something that we kind of just did built it backwards, came up with backwards. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but basically, you want a blue every hand. Do you want 2 blues? No. So if you want to have a blue every hand, you're presenting 29 cards. That's roughly like 8, right? Like 7, I guess. 7, between 7 and 8 is what you would like. So 8's kind of like, for me, like the gold standard. Like I want to have 8 blues in my deck. I don't care what they could literally say anything on them. Ideally they block 3, so that if I ever draw 2 blues, I can block with one of them and still get 3 points of value. But they don't have to. But that's kind of like the base for blues. After that, as many reds as possible. That's the only way I can describe it. Like every yellow you have, and every yellow you're forced to attack with, and every yellow that doesn't block 3 is just -1 in some direction or capacity, right? So I think that's the cleanest answer I can do for ratios.
I think the big question I have, and I think it's a lot of people are split on this one, but how many Phoenix Flames are you playing in your Fi deck?
So I ran the whole gamut. I played 1, I played 2, and I played 3. The stronger my 5 decks are, the fewer Phoenix Flames I typically will play. The more Phoenix Flame cards that literally say the word Phoenix Flame on them, like Draconic cards or the Rise Up from the Ashes, the more I have, the more Phoenix Flames I want to play. Playing Phoenix Flames, as long as you, as a player, realize that there is a cost to playing them. This card does not block. It only attacks for 1. Occasionally, it attacks for 0, which means you're burning a card just to give your weapon go again. Which, by the way, in Welcome to Wraith, that was actually a thing. You would actually burn a card to give your weapon go again. Like, there's a real cost to it. So, like, I don't think it's a windmill slam through Phoenix Flames every single deck type of format. And I think that picking the spots where you can shave off a Phoenix Flame is just like something you kind of get from experience. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I find myself playing, wanting to play 1, but sometimes playing 2, almost never playing 3.
Yeah, I think for me, the reason why, so lately I've been playing more Phoenix Flames. I've been erring towards 3. It's a lot because during the draft, I'm trying to stay open. I'm taking cards like Stoke the Flames, Flame Call Awakening. I'll even take an Inflame. I don't like any of these cards. I don't think that they're that good, but I really enjoy kind of being in this weird, like, I stay open. Inflame is like very fine in Dromai. It's just like whatever. I just it does the job. Sometimes that's just what I want. It's a red. I pitch. I'll take like Inflame over like Yellow Skittering Sands, for example. I just end up having these cards that kind of synergize with Phoenix Flames. And also kind of is this thing where pods that I'm not really familiar with the people, I'm trying to stay open. I want to be in the open lane. I want to be rewarded. I want to be cooperative. What I'm trying to tell you is I'm not forcing Fi, but the results when I was at Utrecht, I only drafted Fi, and I just felt like I was correct. Like I would always have like an Icelander or Dromai passing to me, but I don't know. People said Yanji kept saying that I was forcing it, but
You were drafting
I want
a
to
seat.
say
Michael was drafting a seat. That's what Michael says, and he's sticking to it.
I just ended up being in Fi all the time. I do have like a slight bias towards Fi. Like I feel like you kind of have to knock me off Fi for me to go off of it because I feel like it's like one of the more consistent decks. But I have not drafted it. I've looked at the packs and I'm like, I know what's going on. Like there's like at least one or two five drafters, but I typically like going to draft like I'm very comfortable in that seat. But I highly recommend that if you have never drafted Dromai or Ice Center, please do it. Because at Utrecht day one, there was one Ice Center in my pod. He was the one that was passing to me, and I watched him play a game, and I was like, "There's no way he's winning this game." Like he pitched a yellow to like play a blue Aether Hail from his arsenal, then pitched another yellow to Waning Moon. Did nothing with the resource. Still has like two blues in his hand. I'm like, what is going on? Could have blocked one of them. So
Those heroes, I think, like once you play them and learn the play patterns and stuff, they
Yeah.
can be super rewarding, especially if you're
Oh,
one
yeah.
at the table. Like if you have the reps on it, you should be majority of the time
Yeah.
winning your pods, I think.
Absolutely.
But yeah, if you're
he beat someone, or he lost us to the person that ended up playing the finals, and that was a 5 player who's a 5th 5 with me. He had 2 cracked baubles in his deck. Like that 5 had 2 cracked baubles in his deck, still beats the one. Anyways, you gotta. It's just a thing. Yeah,
it's reps. Like I want to say before we move off Fi, I completely agree with you what you said at the top of the show. I think Fi, if you unfamiliar with this format, fantastic starting point. Like it really is fundamentals of Flesh and Blood in terms of just pure output of numbers for your resources.
Yeah.
But what I will say is the discourse around, like Force Fire is the correct strategy in every single draft pot, I completely disagree with. I think all 3 of the heroes are strong. You ranked Dromai as potentially the strongest. I personally feel that all 3 of the heroes can win a pod, and it comes down to distribution of numbers. So I'm fully on board with that.
Yeah. I think like maybe I answered it kind of not what you guys were thinking, but to me, it's like if you force me to rank them, I'm just thinking, what is the highest of high rolls, highest of ceilings? And that to me is like just like a nuts Dromai deck. Like every turn, you're just outputting damage in a way that's just cheating the power curve of Flesh and Blood.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't always put words in your mouth.
Let's talk about that deck and let's head into Dromai. So what is this nuts Dromai deck? How do you draft it? What cards do you look at?
Like to me, what's really nuts would be a turn where you had one card that you either block or you just make a Chromine with an Ash that you set up the turn before, and then you go Doombreaker, red, Embermont, red. That's a 16 damage turn with 4 red cards. That's getting 4 points of value from each card. That's like something Fi can't do. Like the only way Fi does that is using Engulfing Flame Wave, hitting a 0 cost, and then attacking with that. Like it's like, but that's like all commons for like a Dromai player, blocking up one card, then just pitching a blue, going Doombreaker, Embermaw. That's just like every time you attack with a Doombreaker or an Embermaw, you're getting basically +2 in terms of power curve. Like you're effectively your opponent's at 2 less life, because like your opponent, if they're kind of like a Fi and they attack you with Brothers in Arms, like that's like optimal for them, but they're only getting 6 and you're getting 8 from your Embermaw. The script of course gets changed if they have poppers, but we're just talking like high roll, like highest potential damage. I think good Dromai decks have a good mix of both these Senopais and Rakes, so they're kind of attacking you at two different angles. They have these big attacks that really punish you for not committing cards to block, but then they have these small attacks like when you even like a yellow Rake. Like that's just really annoying. Like you're gonna take a couple of points of damage, you're leaking some damage, and now on your turn, like unless you're one of those little Ash Wings will be maybe Phoenix Flamed, but most often like the other one either doesn't get touched or it gets hit by like a 2 attack or something like that, and that's like introduces these inefficiencies. So on one hand, Dromai's strength is being able to be just over efficient, hyper efficient, and on the other hand, forcing your opponent into these like inefficient scenarios. That's kind of the strength of Dromai. It's just about kind of turn after turn being able to grind out some advantage. And so for me, the biggest like key when I'm playing Dromai is I want to extend the game. Like I don't want to shorten the game. I'm happier to block. I want to keep the game going. I want to have more opportunities to make Ash without taking too much damage. I want to make invoke some of the dragons I've drafted. I just want to prolong the game a little bit, especially against a Fi, because the Fi will run out of reds. The worse the Fi deck is, the faster they'll run out of the reds. Now they're attacking you with yellows, and then they're attacking you with blues. And if you somehow have been able to weather the storm, and keep being really diligent, pitching your reds and playing Oasis or Sand Cover, just like whatever you can to prolong the game, you'll get into a situation where, God forbid, maybe the 5 even whiffs. Like they have a turn, they like they whiff when they're like before your turn. Pitch a blue, grab a Phoenix Flame, right? And Phoenix Flame, weapon, and you're just like, yes, this is like a really good situation. Dromai against Eye Center, you want to prolong the game. Sometimes you just straight fatigue them. If you have an Uvi in your deck, you have like if you play Red Rake, just like don't do anything, just pass turn. Like, what are they gonna do if they don't have the Singe immediately? They're getting basically time walked. Also, Dromai, in terms of draft, obviously a lot of reds. It's funny because you might end up having less than 8 blues. Well, you'll present maybe less than 8 blues, but I do think that it's important to have like about at least 10, maybe even 12 against Icelander. I really think that's like the most optimal thing. It's just fatiguing Icelander. It's like so easy, especially if the silent stilettos. I don't know, like they need singes. They need the singes at the right time. All the dragons that have more than 3 health are just like so hard for Icelander to deal with. And you really don't just like I think when you're playing Dromai into Icelander, you should be careful about attacking with dragons in general. Because you just don't want to give them the ability to pop one of your dragons for free without using an action point, quote unquote. And a lot of times doing nothing is the correct strategy. Just like you have the rake, you have like 4 or 5 Ashwings, and you just like, attack them with something else, but then just pass priority. Like, what are they gonna do? Right? Like, keep the cards in your hand. They don't know if they're reds or blues. Pitch if they try to deal damage. They don't do damage. Great. It's now their turn. Now the onus is on them. So
What do they do? Yeah, my favorite was my Road to Nationals opponent on the weekend, who's a friend of mine, who 10 of his cards in his deck were a mix of sand covers, Oasis Respites, and Healing Balms. So that was definitely got fatigued.
yeah, you as I say, have like no chance as long as they're playing it well. And it's crazy because those are like the worst cards like in the pool against like five. I feel because there's just like you can have a hand that's like all sand cover Oasis, like so depressing. But I learned to just accept that that's fine as Droma. You block out. It's kind of like it feels like you're playing against like a Briar or Viserai, and you're just like praying, please just have a off turn. But it's Fi, so like the chances of having off turn are a lot less, but it is possible. It is possible, especially if I think the best Dromai decks happen because there are just a lot of Fis running around cannibalizing each other. So
So with Dramai, can you talk to me just a little bit about the like card priority, right? So not all dragons are created equal. Obviously, we have like Necria. I think Yendera is very good. The Ember Maw, Cenopai, like you mentioned. So like what cards in particular really stand out for Dramai?
Well, Necria definitely breaks power curve. Necria is like if it was a Magic the Gathering, Necria would be like a mythic. It's just a bomb and a half. It's super efficient. It's 4 damage. It's also like kind of ish 5-ish health. Like it's the numbers, the stat wise, just like more than any of the other dragons. Like it's 4+7, but it's really like 4+5 or 4+6. That's 10. Like none. Like if you add the numbers for all the dragons that are not the majestic dragons, none of them add up to 10. After that, I think Red Rake is extremely important. I don't know. Some people have told me that they don't think it's as good, and I'm like, have you played this card before against like anyone? Like, it's great in the mirror. It's like almost like backbreaking against Icelander if they don't have the Singe immediately, and against Fi, it's still like a pretty annoying road bump. So like, I don't know. After that, it's Ember Moss Cenopai for me. So I think the first 2 Red Rakes are super important. It's kind of interesting. You should really not see a third Red Rake. But at that point, depending on what you expect in terms of matchups, if you expect a lot of Fi, the third Red Rake might not be that good. It's really hard to make that much Ash without taking damage or giving up some type of opportunity. If you have 3 Red Rakes, it's to me it's unlikely you're actually gonna be able to resolve all of them for full value. And maybe I'm not that experienced with Drumline, so you can call me on that. But I do think that if you are presented, this is the only scenario where I would take like an Ember Maw over a Red Rake. It's like the third Red Rake for me. But that's like almost in theory. It's more of a theory because it's like very hard for that to even happen. After that, we actually this is something that Yanji said, and I agree with him. We think that the Ember Maw Cenopai line is more important than the Dunebreaker. So if you have the option to choose between Ember Maw or Dunebreaker, go with the Ember Maw. Our rationale is oftentimes you're not going to get too many Cenopais in your deck. You're going to get maybe like 3 or 4 of each of them at max. Usually you just get like 5 or 6 in total, some mix of them. And so it's unlikely that you're going to have a hand that has both Dunebreaker and Ember Maw to kind of maximize your resources. It's more likely your turn is just like play an Ember Maw, right? Like or play like a zero, like a skittering and then Embermaw. If you're not able to actually use those extra resources from like a Doombreaker, it's often just not a very efficient card. If you could think of like Embermaw Senpai as like a Doombreaker Senpai without Go Again, but with the +2, and that's like the +2 from the Ashwings that maybe you would have been able to attack if you had Go Again. Also, Embermaw Senpai occupies a slot that is not as replaceable. Like Doombreaker Senpai, the red one is especially is kind of like a Skittering Sands in a sense. Like Skittering Sands kind of can act as a Doombreaker Senpai, but nothing can replace Embermaw Senpais. And in the mirror, in the Dromai mirror, the more Embermaws you have, the less likely you'll fatigue because each of your Embermaws requires your opponent to commit more cards. Even the blue one is a 2 for 6, which is still like that's still something. Where otherwise, Dromai mirrors often go fatigue, so if you're boarding into a Dromai, you might want to consider putting in more cards. That's kind of where you maybe put in the yellow sand covers and just kind of have a few more cards so you don't get fatigued, because they will get to a point where you have to choose between life, deck, and dragons. And if you have more cards in your deck, now at least you're only choosing between life and dragons. I don't know if that makes sense, but hopefully that does. Maybe it will make sense if you play a Dromai mirror. Yeah, that's kind of the card prioritization. It's just those two are kind of in their own category. In terms of ranking the dragons, I think there is like the invocations. There is like roughly like Necria, Yenderai. After that, I think Kyloria takes the spot, especially in limited. Then all the zeros. So Chromai is just almost strictly better than Asvalai, just because if Chromai you get popped, you still have a turn. And I think the only thing I want to talk about is Uvia and Vincenterakai are high variance situational cards. Vinny can sometimes win you games, and it can sometimes lose you games. Don't get yourself in situations where it's going to lose you the game. I think is the easiest thing I can say about it. Don't play it against Icelander if they have a card in their arsenal. Uvia, just don't play that card against Fi. Or if you're playing it, like make sure it wasn't because you had to take damage. Block with that card as quickly as you can, because stat-wise, that card's not going to do anything against a Fi. Whereas against Icelander, that card's nuts. So those cards are just situational. Just know when they're good and when they're bad, and just don't put yourself in situations where they're bad, I guess is the easiest thing I can say about them. They're not necessarily like, don't pick them. Oh, this card is trash. I would take anything over it. No, they're good in certain matchups. Just know when they're bad and block with them when they're bad, or just pitch them. So
yeah. All right, so heading into our last hero here, so Icelander, the first question, and the one that I'm not even sure I completely have an answer to, is what sort of ratios are you looking for? Resource ratios. How many reds are you looking for? How many blues? And even how many ice cards?
So this question, same thing in the way that I answered it with the Fi. It's, for me, just prevalent. How many blues do I want in my hand on average, right? I think this can be something that changes. There is no correct answer. It's based off what you end up drafting. The Aether Ice Vein line is extremely powerful. Even the yellow is really good. I'm happy to draft the yellow pretty early. The red is obviously really good. The blue, to me, actually, I prefer the blue over the red. Some people might argue against that, but that's just how the way the Icelander decks I like drafting. I love the blue. I'll take it over the red. If you have a lot of these 3-cost cards, you're going to need more blues in your hand. In fact, you'll need 3 blues to really have like optimal functional turns. But you're not going to always have a 3-cost in your hand. So the number then becomes between 2 to 3 blues. Well, if you're presenting 30 cards, times 2 divided by 3, we're looking at 20 blues is kind of the optimal number. That's just magical Christmas land for me. Like, I don't know how many drafts you guys have done, but getting to 20 blues that I'm not like embarrassed to have in my deck, it's like really hard. And
close.
Yeah, like I think I had 18 once, and I thought I was invincible. So like, I don't know, Brendan. For our team sealed, I presented 18 every time, and I felt like I was just like insane in the mirrors. I just like knew I had more blues than them like by like turn 3. So math wise, it makes like 20 seems like great if you kind of have a good mix of like 3 costs and 0 costs. I think if you have a lot of 0 cost red 3s, those are kind of my favorite to draft early. I'll draft that almost over like a lot of the blues. The only reason I think that is because of modularity. You can have a 0 card hand with a 0 for 3 and not be embarrassed. You can have a 2 card hand and not be embarrassed. You can just 0 for 3, and hopefully the other card is at least a yellow and just Waning Moon. That's only 2 damage, but at least it's something. Those 0 for 3s let you get ganked less. One of the ways you can get ganked as an Icelander is you block, you have another card that you want to block, and your opponent just plays a healing bomb. And now you just like can't do anything with both of these cards, or maybe you can only do something with one of the cards, and that's just like one of the worst places to be. So, but if you have a lot of 0 for 3s, you can cheat on the blue count a little bit. Like when I say cheat, I mean as low as like 13 blues. Because also the other good thing about the 0 cost cards is if you're drafting the blue ones, they also make Waning Moon potentially, make yellows potentially a 3 damage card on your opponent's turn. So that's like we're trying to mitigate disaster, right? We're trying to make an Icelander pool that only has like 12 or 13 blues, but it has a decent amount of yellows. You can get saved by these like 0 cost blues or 0 cost non-attack actions that you can play from your arsenal and make these yellow cards worth a card. So no real clear answer, but I think most Icelanders that are drafting just want to have as many as they can, because that just gives you the most amount of flexibility. I personally err towards having more blues than having these red damaging spells. Red Aether Ice Vein is obviously extremely nuts. But I only want like one in my deck. I'd rather have like one of those and like 2 yellow ones. Because I'm thinking about the Icelander Mirror. I'm just thinking about the way that the hands work. I don't want to take so much damage all the time. Like I think I really only need to pivot once off of a red Aether Ice Vein to really win back that tempo. I just want to have a consistent deck, lots of blues, never have a hand that doesn't have a blue. At maximum, have a hand that has only 1 blue. And sometimes I just like block the whole hand and arsenal blue, or just block almost the entire hand, just play 1 card and keep the card in my arsenal, not even play it that turn if I don't think that I can actually use it that turn. So in terms of ratios, I guess I feel like I'm in trouble if I have less than 13. So if I'm in that 12 range, 10 range, because that's like on average, you're not even that you get 1 blue per hand, but some hands you might not get a blue, and that's really bad.
Yeah, just having some of those, like those unplayable hands are, like you said, in type format, are just they can lose the game really
that
quickly.
might be game. Yeah.
So closing out here, I just want you to. You obviously had a lot of thoughts on the format prior to really putting them to the test. Obviously, there's your local game store, there's your testing group, etc. But you recently had experience in the calling Utrecht. Was there any lessons that you learned from that event?
There are going to be people that force fire in your pod. If you don't think so, you might be the one that's doing it. That's a small joke, but I also don't think people know how to play Icelander very well. Generally, I just felt like this was like the person that ended up drafting Icelander in my pod just like didn't know how to play. I was walking around watching games. I just felt like I feel like if you learn how to play Icelander, you'll be advantaged in the sense that there are people who will literally go to callings and these top tier events just like don't. And like you can, and if you can I play Icelander, you'll just be able to pick up some wins, have these powerful cards that you shouldn't always have. Those are like my main 2 takeaways. I also just feel like I really don't like someone in my pod was DQ'd on day 2. And I kind of feel like it was because they were looking around. I just want to caution you guys as players to just keep that in mind, because there was no warning at all. Like right when the draft ended, a couple of judges came up to the guy and said, "Hey, can you pick up your stuff and walk with us?" And he was just DQ'd, like he just was removed from the tournament. So just keep that in mind. That is something that's a thing, especially day 2 at the calling, because it becomes professional RL.
Interesting.
Good learnings.
Yeah. I'm really keen to see how this format evolves as we head into the Pro Tour, especially off the back of Singapore. I think these major events, they put a lot of our theory to the test. We can do a lot of internal testing and have the thoughts that we have, but it doesn't really crystallize until you go to something like a calling. But anyway, Michael, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you on. Obviously your new podcast, Attack for 20, has been very popular. If you want to dive even deeper into some of the topics that we talked about, especially regarding Limited, go check it out. Outside of that, Michael, you're on YouTube, Cards with M. You do box openings all the time, long streams.
Yeah.
Where else can people find you? Anything else that you wanna plug?
I've been tweeting a little bit more, trying to be another person that just tweets and does coverage, especially when there's like no coverage, just to give the guys back home some type of context into what's going on in the tournaments. And my Twitter is also Cards with M at Cards of M, so check that out.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Michael. And we will, I'll probably see you. I guess the next time I'll see you is going to be in Lille.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you guys
You
so
and
much
Lille.
for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, so signing off for the week, and in the tradition of episode 68 and skipping our usual sections, we are skipping the Guru section this week because we didn't have one. But Hayden, if someone wants to get the review read out on the podcast, how do they do it?
Brendan's desperate. Come on, team. Brendan's desperate. So ratethispodcast.com/Arsenal Pass. It'll direct you to your preferred podcast listening platform, and you can leave a review based on that. They all really help us out. Not only, do they give Brendan a good sort of piece of entertainment and something to do with his time, but they help us get, on the charts and get recognized, and people see the podcast. Maybe, we've got Flesh and Blood players poking around, aren't aware of Arsenal Pass. They can find us a lot easier. So we do appreciate all of the reviews, and I do mean all of the reviews. That's going to be it for this week. Do just want to give a quick plug to the YouTube page again, as we say, shouting for that or reaching for that 5,000 subs. Go drop us a like and a subscription. Twitter, both Brendan and I are on Twitter and in the Flesh and Blood Twitter universe. Brendan is at BrendanAPG. I'm at Fian_Dale. Come and join in the discourse with us. We post a lot about, I guess, things that we're doing, questions we're finding in the community, decks we're playing, events we're playing, etc. All those kind of updates. And of course, last big shout out to all of our patrons. Thank you. Until next week, Brendan. See you next time.